Hey guys, Zomfox here, and it's time to do another position ranking video. This time we're finally going to give some love to the defense, and we're going to be looking at the defensive tackle position. The defensive tackle position is arguably the running back of the defense. Essentially a position that, while everyone does acknowledge is important, gets basically none of the shine and praise that positions like defensive edge, middle linebacker, and a high-tier cornerback get. It is an insanely important position. They are the run stoppers, and if they're really good, they can be guys who actually threaten the passing game as well. So we are going to be looking at the defense. We have done a few of these. There's a playlist that you can click in the top right real quick to go see. I've done head coaches a while ago, but then recently I've done quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, and even kickers. I'm hoping to get at least one more of these out before training camp comes out this upcoming weekend. So be on the lookout for another one after this. I am doing a 500 subscriber Q&A on Monday or Tuesday, so if you have any last minute questions, put them down in the comments below. Without further ado, let's get right into this with number 8, the Michigan Panthers. Now, the one thing to quickly note, since we are talking about a position that isn't necessarily the most obvious on who is there, essentially there's a lot of these guys that end up switching from DE to defensive tackle, or pending how schemes work with outside linebackers, some guys can be kind of pushed into the inside. So some of these guys may end up playing defensive end, and some of them may end up playing defensive tackle that I'm not covering today. These are essentially the guys that, as of right now, are looking to play defensive tackle. And this is heading into training camp, so naturally some of these guys are going to get cut. This is what they are at this moment heading into training camp. Now, number 8 is sadly the Michigan Panthers. I got to be real here. This is definitely the weakest position on the roster. And from what I've seen everywhere, Reddit, Discord, Instagram, and all that, I'm not the only guy that thinks this way for the Panthers. Look, their starters are TJ Carter and Garrett Marino, or projected starters. And when you look at Carter, he's been here, well, he was here back in 2022, and this past couple of years he had been with the Rams, an on and off again active squad member. But now he is back with the Panthers. He wasn't a dominant player, but he was a really good player back in 22. And the Garrett Marino was actually pretty solid. 3.5 sacks as a DT, along with 8 TFLs, is pretty solid. But the issue comes in with their backups, as for this video, just an FYI, I'm only showing 2 backups, considering some of these teams have upwards of like 7 dudes at DT. Now, when you look at their backups, really none of them superly stand out. All these guys either have very minimal like showings in spring football, or they're guys who haven't actually been in spring football but aren't massive guys. Like, take Daniel Weiss, for example. He was really solid in the Big 12 back in college. A 3-time All Big 12 member is pretty solid. But after that, he was only on practice squads pretty much, minus a tiny stint with the commies. But overall, when you look at him, or like, a Jamal Milon, who had some success with the Panthers this past season, this is a pretty weak position group overall, as many other teams either have one legit standout guy or are much more a solid group than they are. So because of that, they are coming in at number 8. The number 7 is going to be the San Antonio Brahmas. Yeah, the Brahmas fall from grace after having a couple of decent spots on lists. That's because they also suffer from the fact that they really don't have the most insane group. Now, I think one of the best additions they got was Trey Botts during the offseason. He had signed with the Stars. He was a pretty big signing for them. This was a dude who was really good back in college. But, I mean, again, he hasn't had spring football experience, and if you guys know what I am, I really like guys who have shown major success. But he is a legit interesting prospect. That's why I have him as a projected starter. And then the other guy I'm expecting to start would probably be Jalen Dalton. He was originally supposed to be on the Dragons, then, the Dragons got kind of shelved, and now he's here. He has had some NFL experience with the Saints especially, but then you have other guys that have had at least, a decent amount of overall time in the NFL. When you look at Jameer Jones, he actually has been in the NFL as an active roster guy for 3 teams. And then you have, some other guys like that, but all in all, I think they're a slightly better version of the Panthers. I actually could see them being 8, as, I'd rather have Garrett Marino or TJ Carter. But I think the overall prospect group here is pretty solid, especially because I think Trey Botts can legit be a top 10, or not even a top 10, really like a top 7, maybe top 5 DT in the league. There's a reason why the Stars drafted him in the college draft, if I'm not mistaken. It was a pretty big deal that they got him, so I'm putting the Brahmas at 7. Then number 6 is where we start to get to the really solid teams. That's the Stallions. I know, shocking, the Stallions not in the top 3 in a list. This is one of their weakest positions on paper, only in a sense that other teams are better. Because really, I think we all kind of, there's a lot of guys, like I said early in the video, that, DT is kind of an unsung position. Willie Arbery was really good this past season. Like, 3 TFLs isn't the most for a DT, but 4 sacks is pretty solid, and 33 tackles, that's a pretty damn good run stopper. But no one ever really talked about him as a DT. It was either Olive, or it was Boogie, or it was the actual all USFL guys. So that's a pretty solid one. And then Carlos Davis, this is a dude who has been in the NFL. He was a 7th round pick and was actually on the Steelers for like 3 years. So having him join this team, he was a big free agent signing, which is really nice. And they've got a couple other pretty decent guys they added. I mean, when you look at a guy like, Marvin Wilson. Marvin Wilson was an all-ACC type player back at college, and he's had some active experience as well. And then you look at a guy like Jalen Twyman. He's another guy that was drafted in the NFL. So this team has a lot of really solid backup guys, and they have one exceptionally good starter. It's just that other teams either are much better in depth somehow, or they have a starter that's better. So they come in at 6. Now, one of those teams that has one much better starter is the Battlehawks. The Battlehawks' issue is their depth, because they have one awesome player they just signed recently. Austin Faoliu is awesome. This is an all-XFL player this past season. He was incredible with the Dragons, and he ended up parlaying that success to the Seattle Seahawks, and now is with the St. Louis Battlehawks. He was like a last-second free agent. He's one of the most recent signings. Now, she was still waiting for Te'amu to officially sign, but until he does, when you look at Austin, he is I think one of the most 7 recent free agent signings, if not earlier. I'm kind of mixing up one of the days. But he was a big signing for them. This was a really good defensive tackle this past season. Huge ad. The issue is the rest of their team. The other guy I'm projecting to be the starter is Kobe Smith. But he's a guy that's had, some NFL experience, but he is technically a Super Bowl champion, believe it or not. But the issue is that he's probably your second best guy. When you look at guys like Kevin Atkins or Mandy Alonso, those are guys who have, either been pretty good in college or, in Atkins' case, was in the XFL this past season, but wasn't necessarily the most, big name type of guy. 14 tackles and 1 sack is solid, but not the best. The fact is, I think that overall they have one incredible starter, but the rest of their team's kind of lacking. If it wasn't for having Austin as their starter, I'd put them below the Stallions, but he is the best between those two teams, so I'm putting him at 5. The number 4 is where we start to get the really good ones. That's the Defenders. The Defenders have absolutely 0 all-league players. That being said, they have guys that are all-league talent. Boogie Roberts is the name of the game here. Massive fall in the draft. Probably the most shocking fall in either draft was seeing him not only not get selected in the USFL dispersal draft, but fall as far as he did in the XFL one. We're talking about a dude who's one of the top TFL guys this past season at 8. I believe that was tied for 4th or was 4th in the league. 32 tackles is really solid. 3 sacks. Dude was a monster and a huge reason why the Maulers made it to the championship game. Also being a USFL legend in a community sense. He's very active on Instagram. If you DM him, he'll probably DM you back within the next couple hours or something. And he is a guy that, is a huge fan guy. The mayor of Pittsburgh, that kind of guy. Incredible. Then TJ Barnes, really solid this past season. Now, again, not the most lit up in the stat sheets kind of thing. 2 sacks to 18 tackles isn't much more than Atkins, but it still is a really solid number. And the fact is that their backups are pretty solid too. Niles Scott is a dude who's had a lot of NFL experience, whether it be bouncing on practice squads or slight times on the active roster. He's been around since 2018 in the NFL. You have to be at least pretty good to be able to stick around practice squads for 5 years. And then you got guys like, you've got another solid player who has some stats. It's just, overall, when you look at it, this is a really solid group. The overall backups far exceed a lot of these other teams' backups. So because of that, I'm putting them at 4, especially since you have 2 legitimately really good starters. Is this where we start to see where teams have 2 legit top-tier DTs? Now, there's something I'm going to be shocked that the Defenders are this low because I talked about them. The dispersal draft's having a top-tier D-line. Their defensive edge position is phenomenal. Their DT is just pretty good. I'd still say they have probably the 2nd or 3rd best D-line in the whole league. It's just DT is the weakness of their great D-line, which isn't even really a weakness because I'm putting them at 4th. But number 3 is going to be the Memphis Showboats. This is where you start to have a really big player. Now, they only have 4 guys that are currently DTs, but all of them have spring football experience, and one of them is John Atkins. While I do think, and I still stand by, that he should not have been all USFL over a certain player we're going to talk about in a couple spots, he still was an all USFL player. Great run stopper, solid at getting the quarterback. Not insane, but solid. But you've got 3 other guys that have USFL experience. Now, Connor Christian is probably going to be a starter. He came from New Orleans. 1.5 sacks and 16 tackles isn't a ton, but considering the system he came from, it's pretty incredible. Now, I honestly would buy an argument for this team to be a bit lower, but I think that when you're looking at it, you've got 3 guys that have spring football experience, and the fact that the Showboats only have 4 DTs on their roster shows they have a lot of faith in these guys, and I do take that as a big deal. Just like with the kicker video, there's a reason why basically every team that had 1 kicker was so much higher than the rest, because it's showing that you have full faith in your group. Considering that these are probably going to be the 4 defensive tackles they have, shows a lot of faith, putting them at 3. And number 2, the Renegades. Really solid group, really. Look, Doug Costin, massive that they have him still. Dude was a champion in both leagues. He is 2022 USFL champion, 2023 XFL champion. He was solid in college, and he continued to be solid in spring football. Really solid. And then their other projected starter, when you look at Bunmi Rudimi, 1.5 sacks, 13 tackles, not insane. But then you look at those backups too, man. Like, you've got backups that have either legit experience in a guy like Tomasi Lalile, but then you look at a guy like Trayvon Coley. Yikes. 100 career NFL tackles. This is a dude who has legit NFL experience. We ain't talking about, no, he got 2 tackles, he was in a game. We're talking about a dude who's been in games, was an active squad member for years, 3 years with the Browns, 1 year with the Colts, kind of, a year between the Cardinals and Jets, and 2021 he was on an active squad. Him being here, I'm putting him as a, projected guy, as a backup, but that's only because of the fact that Rodemy has played in the XFL, but I would not be shocked if Coley ends up being a starter. Him and Costin is a dynamic duo. That's easily the second best duo in the whole league as starter. I would put that above Boogie and Barnes personally. It's a really good duo. So when you look at that, that's pretty damn good. Number 2, shouldn't be a shock. Don't even need to mention the other backups. But number 1 is the Roughnecks. This literally is zero surprise. It's obvious. When you clicked on this video, you knew one spot. You knew number 1 was the Roughnecks. Because Toby Johnson is, in a technical standpoint, the unarguable best defensive tackle. Why do I say technically unarguable? Because he's the only one who was an all-USFL player twice, or all-league player twice. At least at the naturally I'm talking about DT position. I believe Davin Bellamy it might have been. But when you look at Toby Johnson, 2-time all-USFL, followed, or that came after being a first-team all-IFL guy and an IFL champion. I mean, that's incredible. But then you go to another guy in Keontae Schott. That's the guy who should have been all USFL this past year with Toby. 7.5 sacks, was second in the league. As a defensive tackle, he was second. 9 TFLs, was top 3. I know stats aren't everything, but the fact that Atkins got it over him, and the fact that Schott didn't even make the top 50 players, I hate to say it, but all the voters lose a lot of credibility when a guy like that isn't on the list. Incredible. Look, Reggie Howard is damn solid, but Olive Sagapalu, dude, he legitimately would start on any other team. I mean, really. Any other team besides maybe the Renegades, he's a starter. And he's going to be a backup. Odds are, he's a backup here. That's crazy. That's actually mad. And then you got, Ethan Westbrooks. I can't even fit him, or Glenn Logan. Both those guys are damn solid players. Ethan Westbrooks was more of a, sportsman guy. He was sportsman of the year as a player. I've talked about it. He was solid. But Glenn Logan is a dog. And he's the 5th best defensive tackle on this team. Think about that. Glenn Logan was really solid with the Roughnecks this past season. The actual Roughnecks, if I'm not mistaken. The Roughnecks. Now he's here. He's probably their 5th best DT. Look, of all these lists, they've been at least somewhat close at the top. I feel like. At least somewhat. The kicker was a bit of a wash. But this is a flat-out destruction. The Roughnecks easily clear the entire rest of the league. If their DT group is not the best in the league this upcoming season, barring injuries, massive, colossal failure. by the team, the coaching staff, the players. Because on paper, which is how this is being done in a sense, since we're talking about, a lot of guys who haven't played together, on paper, no DT group is even half as good as this. I mean, really. Keontae Shad, Toby Johnson are your starters. Olive Sagapolu is a backup. Reggie Howard Jr. is a backup. Glenn Logan is a backup. I rest my case there. There's nothing else to say. So that'll do it for the defensive tackle position rankings. I hope you guys like this first defensive one we're doing. I'm probably going to do one more before the power rankings video. If I decide to push it back, which I really don't want to, I'll push it back to like mid next week, but I kind of want to get it out either the first day or the second day of training camp. So I'm probably going to have one more position ranking video come out before that, and then I'll do like maybe one or two after training camp when we're heading into the season. I'll probably do a ranking the starting quarterback video. So I am doing one more. It probably is going to be either safety or cornerback, since I kind of want to do at least one facet of every game. I did, the quarterback. I did running back. I did one of the receiver positions. I've done one of the trenches positions, at least the D-line position. I have done a special teams position. I will do probably a defensive back position, probably safety, but maybe corner. I don't know. Corner is pretty hard to judge. Corner is much of an eye test, whereas instead of a playing test. So maybe on that one. But I am going to do at least one more before the training camp power rankings video. As a spoiler alert, I am going to be using these position rankings for the training camp power rankings video. I want to do something a bit different with this one. Again, next week, Monday or Tuesday, is the Q&A. Any questions, put them down in the comments below. And as always, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Have a great night.